During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk about the reasons why farmers rotate or plant different crops from one year to the next.
Well, when they talk about rotating crops, they're not saying, well, the whole farm was corn this year and next year the whole farm will be soybeans. What rotation means is on this particular piece of ground, this year it's one crop, next year it's another crop. Or if you're in an area that could double crop, say you're in the south and you've got a long growing season, maybe you've got enough growing season to grow two different crops this year.
Well, the other thing is, let's say it was a 6-crop rotation. People might talk about, all right, over the next 6 years, I'm going to plant corn, then soybeans, then wheat, then canola, then sugar beets, then whatever it happens to be. My point is, farmers will say the word rotation, and that's really what they're talking about. It's planting a different crop next.
One of the reasons that farmers may choose to do this is to avoid insect problems. I'll give you a good example. This past growing season, there was a huge amount of corn rootworms out there, and for farmers who want to plant corn back into last year's cornfields, well, guess where those rootworms are overwintering? Primarily in last year's corn. So by rotating to a crop like soybeans that isn't a host for corn rootworms, farmers can avoid some of the problems that they would otherwise see from that carryover insect.
All right, so insects, that's a big reason. Diseases is another. For example, when I think about the worst disease that we could have in corn on our farm, one that pops to mind is Goss's wilt. Well, that's not a disease that soybeans can even have, so we rotate corn with soybeans. On the flip side, if you look at soybeans, the worst one we can have there is Sclerotinia white mold. Well, fortunately, corn doesn't have that disease, so if I rotate crops, then that kind of breaks the cycle, and then the next time I go back to the crop, whether it's corn or beans, then I have less of that particular disease to worry about.
Well, another problem that farmers can help manage a little bit better with crop rotation is weed control. When you think about tough grass weeds, they're really difficult to control in a grass crop like wheat or corn. So if farmers have a crop like soybeans in there that's a broadleaf crop, well, it's easy to control grasses in a broadleaf crop. And the same can be said for broadleaf weeds. Boy, they're tough to control in the broadleaf crops, but in grass crops, they're much easier.
Last thing I want to bring up is nutrients. For example, this last fall, when we did soil testing on our farm, we realized some of our cornfields had lots of nitrogen left over. Part of that was because the yield was down just a little bit, but the other part is it was just a great year for organic matter mineralization, where the soil produced its own nitrogen, released its own nitrogen out of the organic matter. Well, we had all kinds of nitrogen left. With nitrogen being really expensive, we just said, why would we let the soybeans use that when they don't really need that? Let's plant corn again and take advantage of all that nitrogen that's there. So sometimes we don't necessarily want to rotate, we just want to plant the crop that's right based on the nutrients that are in that soil.
The last thing I'll say, Brian, is timing, because when you think about if you've got a wheat crop that you're going to harvest in July, but a corn crop that you're going to harvest in October, well, that's wonderful to have in your rotation to really spread that workload out. The same could be said for planting time. If you've got a crop like corn that likes to get planted early, and you've got a crop like cotton that likes to be planted late, well, that's great to have those two in the rotation, because now you can just plant corn and worry about that, and the cotton will have plenty of time to get that in the ground.
Hey, one thing I should say too, a lot of non-farmers will say, well, why don't you just rotate all these crops and then you'll solve this problem or that problem or whatever. Well, at the end of the day, as farmers, we have to make money. So like for us on our farm, yeah, there are 50 different crops or maybe 500 different crops we could raise, but corn and soybeans make the most money. And a lot of these other crops, we can't even make any money by raising them because of our geography, the climate, the amount of sunlight we get, whatever it is. So the point is, yes, rotation can solve a lot of problems, but not in all cases can farmers rotate the way they would want to necessarily, because they've got to make economic sense at the end of the day. And I'll say too, it's a lot easier if I'm only planting corn and soybeans as opposed to 16 other crops, because now I need a lot less equipment and a lot less knowledge about crops in general, because I only have 2 that I'm specializing in.
Well, one thing that you have to specialize in, no matter how many crops you raise, is weed control. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed later in the show.